The royal courtyard of Alaris was full of music, guards, and shining banners. It was the day everyone had waited for. The long war had ended, and a guest from across the hills had finally come to meet their ruler. The crowd whispered and watched as a tall man in strong silver armor walked toward the golden steps of the palace. His name was Ethan Cole. He was known for his calm eyes and steady hands, a man who had fought many battles and carried his scars with quiet pride. At the top of the marble stairs stood Queen Althea. She was young but carried herself with the stillness of someone much older. Her crown shone with thin silver leaves, and her gown moved like water when she walked. Her people said she never bowed to anyone, not even to the elders or the high council. When the gates opened for the stranger, every sound in the courtyard began to fade. Ethan moved forward, his armor shining under the sunlight. The wind blew softly between the tall white columns, and the scent of wild roses filled the air. Queen Althea looked down at him. He looked up at her. For a long moment, they simply stared at each other, not speaking. The guards shifted uneasily. The nobles held their breath. Then, something happened that no one in Alaris had ever seen. The queen stepped down from her place and walked toward the man from across the hills. Her steps were slow, every movement quiet and careful. When she stopped in front of Ethan, she lifted her head and met his eyes again. There was a small silence, like the world itself was waiting to see what she would do next. Then, she lowered herself to her knees. Gasps filled the courtyard. The queen, their proud and distant ruler, was kneeling before a man she had never met before. Ethan felt his chest tighten. For a second, he thought she was hurt or faint, but her face showed no weakness. She was calm. She was sure of what she was doing. Ethan opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. His throat felt dry. He removed his helmet, holding it against his side, his eyes never leaving her. He could see the light from her crown reflect in her eyes, bright and soft. "Your Majesty," he managed at last, his voice low and unsteady. "Please stand." "You owe me no bow." But the queen looked up at him with a strange expression. Her voice was quiet, but it carried across the stone court. "You do not understand. Kneel not to show my weakness. I kneel because the moment I looked into your eyes, I saw what my kingdom has lost." The nobles whispered, unsure whether to feel anger or awe. The guards tightened their grip on their blades, waiting for an order that never came. Ethan stood still, his heart beating fast. He was a soldier, not a courtman. He did not know what to say to a queen who spoke like that. Slowly, Althea rose to her feet. Her cloak brushed the marble floor as she stood before him. "You came here from far away to bring peace," she said. "And in your eyes, I saw the courage that my people once had." Ethan shook his head lightly. "I am only a man, Your Majesty. A captain who fights when he must." "And yet," she replied, "you remind me that even a queen is human." Her hand reached out, and for a moment it seemed like she might touch his face. She stopped just short, fingers trembling in the air between them. "You have crossed more than seas to come here," she said softly. "You have crossed into fate itself." The crowd behind them remained silent. No one dared move. It was as if the world held its breath, waiting for something sacred to end. Ethan finally bowed, lowering his head. "Then let fate bring peace," he said. For the first time in many years, the queen smiled. It was a small, fleeting thing, yet enough to make the court murmur again. And when she turned to lead Ethan into the palace, the sunlight caught them both, casting one long shadow behind them that looked somehow like the beginning of a single story. In the days that followed, people would tell the story again and again. How the man from across the hills made the queen kneel. How she saw something in him that no crown or army could give her. Some said it was magic. Others said it was destiny. But those who had truly watched that moment swore it was something far simpler and much stronger. Something that lived only in human hearts. And Ethan, who came as a stranger, would remember that silence forever. The way the world paused, the way her eyes caught his. And how the queen, mighty as she was, had bowed not to a man of power, but to the truth she saw in his soul. The days after the strange meeting were quiet but heavy with whispers. Every hallway of the palace carried the story. The servants told it in secret corners. The nobles repeated it with pride or fear. And even the guards spoke about it in low voices, as if it were a dream. The queen had knelt before a soldier. No one understood why. Some said it was a sign of the end times. Others said it meant hope. Ethan Cole did not understand it either. He had come to Alaris to offer a peace deal between his people and the queen's kingdom. He had expected a formal talk with rules, guards, and long speeches. Not this. Not a moment that changed everything. He could not forget her eyes, or how calm she looked when she knelt. For 3 days, he stayed in the guest wing of the palace. He watched the sun rise over the marble towers and tried to make sense of what happened. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the queen's face. There was strength there, but also sadness. He wondered how it must feel to carry the weight of an entire kingdom on your shoulders. On the 4th morning, a young messenger knocked on his door. "The queen asks for you," the boy said nervously. Ethan nodded and followed. He walked through wide halls where soft lights glowed through tall glass windows. When he entered the royal garden, Queen Althea was already there, standing by a fountain shaped like 2 wings. She turned when she heard his steps. "Captain Ethan," she greeted him. Her voice was calm, but her eyes held warmth instead of the cold command from before. "Tell me, do you sleep well in Alaris?" "As well as a guest can, your majesty," Ethan replied. He did not bow this time. Something about her made ceremony feel unnecessary. She smiled slightly. "Good. I called you here because I must understand what happened that day. I am not a woman who acts without reason. Yet when I saw you, something told me to kneel. My heart acted before my crown could stop it." Ethan watched the fountain water shimmer in the sunlight. "Sometimes the heart knows what the mind cannot explain," he said. "But I swear to you, your majesty, I never wished for that. I never wanted to dishonor you." "There was no dishonor," she said softly. "He saw strength as equal to yours. No ruler should see that as shame." They walked through the garden together. Queen's gown brushed lightly over the stone path. Around them, small white flowers grew among vines. The air smelled of rain, even though the sky was clear. "Tell me," she said after a moment, "why'd you come so far from your home? What drives a man to cross seas and mountains for peace?" Ethan paused. "War took everything that made me proud," he said quietly. "My friends, my brothers, my land. I wanted to protect them, but I could not. So when I heard of your kingdom's struggles, I knew I had to come here and stop more wars before they began." The queen listened carefully. "Then perhaps fate brought you here," she said. "You fight not for glory, but for balance. That is rare." They stopped by the fountain again. The sound of water filled the silence between them. Althea lowered her head slightly, as if thinking deeply. "My council does not trust you," she said finally. "They think you charm me to take control. They call you a stranger with hidden fire in his eyes." Ethan chuckled softly. "If I had such power, I would use it to end foolish talk, not start it." The queen smiled faintly, the corners of her lips lifting. "Speak with honesty. My advisors speak with fear. That is the difference between you and them." She looked toward the distant towers of her palace. "For years I have led this kingdom alone. Duty can be colder than steel, and solitude sharper than any blade." Her voice nearly broke on the last words. Ethan noticed. He wanted to say something kind, but he was not good with gentle words. He only stepped closer and said, "No ruler should carry the world alone." For a moment she looked at him, and something unspoken passed between them. It was not love, not yet, but recognition to souls that had fought the same kind of battles, though in different ways. As the sun set behind the tall walls, their reflections shimmered beside each other in the fountain water. The queen turned away first. "Tomorrow," she said softly, "come to the council chamber. We will speak of peace between our lands. But tonight, rest. The path of the brave is long, and I think you have much more to travel." Ethan bowed his head, not out of duty, but respect. As he walked away, he could still feel her gaze on his back. In that quiet, he understood something new. It was not just peace he had come here to make. It was understanding between 2 hearts that did not yet know how deeply their fates had already been tied. The morning light spread across the palace like gold dust on stone. The city still whispered about the strange bond between the queen and the soldier, but now their talk had changed. Many said peace might soon come. Some said the queen was bewitched. Others said she had simply grown tired of endless war. Ethan walked through the palace hall with steady steps. He was on his way to meet the council. Servants bowed as he passed, but he barely noticed them. His mind was full of thoughts about the queen and what she had said yesterday. He respected her strength, but he also saw how alone she truly was. He had spent years on battlefields filled with iron and smoke, yet he could see that her loneliness was another kind of war. When he reached the great chamber, the guards opened the tall doors. Inside sat 12 council members around a wide table carved from dark wood. At the head sat Queen Althea. She looked calm, but her eyes flashed with quiet tension. Ethan bowed slightly. "Captain Ethan," she said, her voice steady, "my council will now hear your proposal." Ethan placed a small packet of scrolls on the table. "Your Majesty," he began, "your people and mine share the same rivers, the same skies, yet we fight over borders drawn by fear. My message is simple. If we join forces not as conquerors but as equals, both our people may finally rest." The council murmured among themselves. An older lord with sharp features rose to his feet. "You speak well, Captain," he said, his tone cold. "But who are you to ask that our queen share her rule with outsiders?" Ethan kept his calm. "I ask for no throne and no power. I stand only for peace." Another lord slammed his hand on the table. "Peace with strangers never lasts. He will take what he wants and then turn his armies on us." The queen raised her hand and the hall went quiet. "Enough," she said. "Let him finish." Ethan nodded in thanks. "I cannot promise your fears will vanish," he said, "but I can promise that I will stand by this treaty until my last breath." There was silence. Then slowly, the queen spoke. "The council will think on your words," she said. "For now you may leave us." Ethan bowed again and left the chamber. Outside, the courtyard glowed under the afternoon sun. The air was clear, but his mind was full of shadows. He could sense that some of the nobles wanted him gone. Later that night, he stood on the balcony of his room, looking at the city lights. The stars hung low, their pale shine reflecting on the winding river. He could hear the faint sound of footsteps behind him. Queen Althea stepped into the light, wearing a plain robe instead of her crown. "You handled them well," she said softly. "Few men face my counsel with such calm." Ethan smiled faintly. "I did not wish to anger them. They are angry because they are afraid," she said, "afraid that someone might show them a truth they cannot control." He turned to face her fully then, studying the faint tiredness around her eyes. "You carry a heavy throne, Your Majesty," he said quietly. "And you," she said, "carry a heavier heart." They stood for a moment, the silence stretching like a bridge between them. Then the queen looked down at the city lights. "There is a man among the nobles," she said slowly. "Lord Varen, he hides his hate behind smiles. I fear he is planning something. If he moves against me, he will move against you, too." Ethan frowned. "Then I will stay by your side until the danger passes." Althea shook her head gently. "No, you cannot fight every battle for me. Then let me fight the one that matters," he said. "The one for you?" Her eyes lifted to his. For the first time she looked uncertain, like a queen stripped of her crown and left only as a woman. "You would risk your life for a ruler of another land?" she asked. He hesitated for a breath. "For a ruler who kneels for truth, yes. For you, yes." The world seemed to still around them as those quiet words hung in the air. Between the sound of the wind and the distant hum of the city, nothing else existed. Finally, the queen stepped forward. Her hand rested briefly on his arm, light as the wind itself. "Yes, be careful, Ethan," she said. "The court can be more dangerous than any battlefield." "I have faced blades sharper than words," he answered with a small smile. Her lips curved in a quiet laugh, the first true one he had ever heard from her. Then she turned and walked back toward the doorway. When she reached it, she stopped. "Tomorrow, we announce our peace to the people," she said without turning around. "If war returns, we will face it together." He watched her go, the gentle sound of her steps fading down the hall. Something deep inside him stirred, something stronger than duty, something older than fear. That night, as the stars faded above the horizon, Ethan promised himself that come what may, he would protect Queen Althea. Not just for the sake of peace between two lands, but because she had shown him something no war ever could hope. Fragile but real, shining like a small fire against the darkness. The next morning filled the city with light and noise. Bells rang from tall towers. People gathered in the streets outside the palace. Today was the day Queen Althea and Captain Ethan Cole would speak to the people about peace. Everyone had heard the rumors of their bond, but no one knew what would truly happen. Some waited with hope, others with fear. Ethan stood in the side hall, preparing himself. He had put aside his battle armor for a simple dark coat, though a sword still hung at his side. His heart beat fast. He had faced enemies on the field without trembling, but this was different. A soldier could fight a clear enemy. Peace was harder. Peace was a dream others could destroy with whispers. A servant came to him and said softly, "The queen waits for you, sir." Ethan walked into the throne chamber. It glowed with sunlight through clear windows. Queen Althea stood near her throne, dressed not in gold or silver, but in plain blue with her hair unbound. She turned when she heard him enter. "You look uneasy," she said gently. He nodded. "I would rather charge into a storm than speak to a city full of strangers," she smiled. "Courage does not live only in battle. Today your voice is our sword." For a moment they said nothing. Then she stepped closer to him and lowered her voice. "I fear what will come next. Some among the council would rather see war continue, Lord Varen most of all. I can feel his eyes on me even now." Ethan frowned. "Then I will be near you at every step." "You already are," she said softly, and turned toward the great door. Outside in the grand courtyard, thousands had gathered. The banners of Alaris moved in the wind. The people saw their queen and began to cheer, their voices lifting like a wave. Althea raised her hand, and silence slowly spread through the crowd. "My people," she said, "for years we have fought, lost, and mourned. We have called for peace, but feared it when it came near. Today that ends. This man beside me has shown that peace is not weakness. It is courage, the rarest kind. We will join hands with his people and build a future that no sword can break." The crowd murmured, some cheering while others stayed quiet. Ethan could see the faces hopeful, wary, confused. Then a sudden voice broke through, shouting, "We do not trust outsiders." The queen's eyes lifted, but Ethan placed a steady hand near his sword. From the far end of the court, several men in armor began to push through the crowd. The guards moved at once. Arrows flashed through the sunlight, striking shields and stone. Screams filled the air as panic spread. Ethan pulled the queen behind the marble column. "Stay down," he said quickly, drawing his sword. "No," she said, her voice sharp. "This is my home. I will not hide while my people fight." She stepped out again, her robe flowing behind her, and raised her hand for calm. "Stop," she called. Her voice cut through the noise like a bell. "Stop this madness." The fighting slowed for a moment. Then a man stepped forward from the shadows near the front gate. It was Lord Varen. His eyes gleamed coldly. "You have brought a stranger to rule us, my queen," he said. "Your voice belongs to him now." Ethan moved between them. "You are wrong," he said firmly. "The queen bows to no one. She seeks only to save her people. Why betray her for pride?" Varen laughed, a hard sound. "Because her peace will make us weak. And weakness will destroy us faster than war." Ethan lunged forward as Varen drew his blade. The clash of steel echoed through the courtyard. Guards rushed in. The crowd fled toward the gates. Althea's eyes followed every move, fear and fury mixing inside her. The fight was fast, but fierce. Ethan struck with the calm of a trained soldier, while Varen fought with rage that burned wild. At last, Ethan knocked the weapon from his enemy's hand. Varen fell to his knees, hatred still in his face. Ethan held back his strike. "It does not have to end in blood," he said. "Lay down your anger." But Varen reached for a hidden knife. Before he could move, an arrow from a guard flew straight, ending the fight. Silence followed.
Ow.
The crowd stared as Queen Althea stepped forward, her eyes full of grief. "He was my friend once," she whispered. "Now another life is gone because we could not let go of fear." Ethan sheathed his sword and said, "You still have your people. They saw today that peace has a price, but also a power." She looked up at him, tears shining in her eyes. "You risked everything for me and for them?" He shook his head. "For truth." The sun began to lower. The people slowly returned, their voices calmer now. The queen raised her hand again. "Let it be known," she said, "that today peace did not fall, it stood. Though our enemies rose, we still stand as one. The crowd answered her with cheers that rolled through the city. The sound reached beyond the palace walls and into the hills. As evening came, Ethan stood beside her in the quiet balcony overlooking the city. The smoke from the fires below drifted into the pink sky. Althea took a deep breath. "I will never forget this day," she said. "Nor will I," Ethan answered softly. "Because today, courage looked like you." For a long moment, they stood together in silence, while the wind carried the last echoes of the crowd into the night. Peace had not come easily, but it had come with truth, and that truth had changed them both forever. The palace was quiet after the long day of battle and fear. Torches burned along the stone paths, their flames moving slowly in the cool night air. The people had returned to their homes, tired but hopeful. The Queen's voice had reached their hearts, and for the first time in many years, the word peace no longer sounded like a dream. Ethan walked through the courtyard, feeling every ache in his body. His wounds were small, but his mind was heavy. He had seen too many good men fall in war, and even here, in the kingdom that he hoped would be safe, blood had found its way to the stones again. He stopped near the fountain where he and the Queen had once spoken and listened to the water's soft sound. He did not hear her approach until her shadow moved beside his. "Could you not sleep either?" Queen Althea asked. He turned to her. She was wearing a light cloak, her crown left behind. The dim light, she looked less like a queen and more like a woman, simply trying to breathe after holding her world together for too long. "No," Ethan said quietly. "Every time I close my eyes, I see the fight. I see his face. I wonder if I could have stopped it sooner." She shook her head gently. "Do not carry blame that belongs to fate. Varen made his choice. You saved far more lives than you took." They stood in silence for a moment, watching the moonlight reflect on the water. Somewhere far off, the sound of slow drums marked the watchmen making their rounds. "Tomorrow," Althea said, "our council meets again. It will ask that I make the treaty official. I will sign it." Ethan looked at her, surprised. "After what happened? You still want to join our lands?" "Yes," she said firmly. "If we let fear rule us now, then all of this was for nothing." She paused, then added in a lower voice, "But I want you there when I sign. You began this with me. You should be there when it becomes real." "I will be there," Ethan said. The next day arrived quietly. The city was calm, though guards still stood on every wall. The council was gathered again, but now their faces looked tired, less proud, less sure. The Queen entered the grand hall and took her place at the head of the table. Ethan stood behind her, silent but steady. When she spoke, her voice filled the room. "My people have seen enough of fear," she said. "We have lost sons, fathers, and daughters to wars that should never have begun. Today we end that story. Let this treaty with Captain Ethan's people mark the start of a new one written not with swords, but with hope." The scroll was brought forward. Her graceful hand took the quill. The room watched as she signed her name, the ink dark and strong upon the paper. Then she handed the quill to Ethan. He hesitated for a second, looking at her. "It feels strange," he said softly. "After all I have done in war, to sign something in the name of peace." She smiled at him. "Then you have finally found your true battle." He bent his head and signed. Applause rose from the hall. The deed was done. For a moment, past and future seemed to meet in that single sound. Later, as evening returned, the Queen found Ethan on the same balcony where they had stood after the fight. The sky glowed orange and blue, and the city lights began to flicker below. "So, Captain," she said with a trace of humor in her voice, "what will you do now that the war is over?" He looked out over the city. "I do not know," he admitted. "For years I dreamed only of survival and duty. Now I feel something I do not understand. Peace feels ... lighter. But without battle, I wonder who I am." She turned toward him. "Perhaps you are more than a soldier now," she said softly. "Perhaps you are the man who taught a queen how to see her people again." He looked at her. For a moment, no titles existed between them. "And perhaps," he said, "you are the queen who taught a soldier how to find his heart." Her smile grew, gentle and real. "Then maybe we have both learned what we were meant to." The wind moved through the balcony arches, carrying their words into the glowing dusk. The city below was alive with music and laughter. Children chased each other in the torchlit streets, unafraid of what tomorrow might bring. Ethan turned to look at the horizon. The stars began to rise, one by one. "It's beautiful," he said quietly. Althea followed his gaze. "Yes," she whispered. "For once, we can watch the stars without wondering if they hide fire." They stood together as night settled over the land. No throne or crown separated them now. In that calm silence, the world finally felt balanced again. Rumors would later tell of how a queen and a soldier built peace not with power, but with understanding. Some would say she knelt before him. Others would whisper that he bowed to her instead. But those who truly knew told another story, that for a breath in time, two hearts from different paths met in truth. And their courage changed the fate of all who came after. And there, beneath the quiet stars, Queen Althea and Captain Ethan Cole stood side by side, no longer ruler and warrior, but simply two souls who had seen the worst of the world and still chosen to believe in its light.